Hi, and welcome to another episode of the ARC podcast with Jen and Lindsey. Jen, how are you today?
I'm great, Lindsay. I know that you and I are both still dealing with some illness in our houses. So how are you guys doing?
Oh, we're hanging in there. Illness be gone is what we keep saying. We've got everything on sanitary right now, and one of us is always holding Lysol, is where we're at. I'm not gonna lie, it's rough.
I know I hate that. I hate it. So almost there. We're almost there. We're almost to spring where we can
I
move on
know.
from this. And yeah, you won't have to carry Lysol and antibacterial soap around as much.
I hope so. I hope. I hope there's
Well, I'm
light at the end of the
excited.
tunnel.
We've got a really great podcast today. We have
No.
representative in Ohio House 1 here in Ohio, Representative Dontavius Jarrells here on the
Whoop.
podcast with us
Hey
today.
everybody, hey everybody.
Woohoo!
Hey y'all.
Welcome. We're really excited. We have been working with you, or I have, along with a number of organizations around Ohio for, oh my gosh, probably almost a year now, talking and having interested party meetings for
Yes.
um, a House Bill 427,
Yes.
which
It's
is,
out.
yes, it's
It's
out,
out.
guys. This bill is
Finally, I'm
called,
so excited.
yeah, it's called Ohio Employment First and Greater Opportunities for Persons with Disabilities Act.
Yes.
Representative Jarrells, tell us about this bill and just give us like the sell on it if you can.
Well, listen, first and foremost, thank you to both of you for inviting me on. It's really an honor and a privilege to come on to talk about amazing bills that touch every person, every life across Ohio. This bill is a bipartisan bill with myself and Representative Scott Lips. And essentially, what it does is it phases out the payment of subminimum wage to individuals with disabilities in Ohio over the next 5 years. And so, to give you kind of a setup, currently under the Fair Labor Standards Act, employers can pay workers with disabilities and others, so including physical disabilities, people with mental illness and addiction, a what we call below minimum wage or sub minimum wage, if authorized by the U.S. Department of Labor. And so essentially what we look at is this system is really based on this perceived idea of a person's earning capacity, and in many cases perpetuates negative stereotypes and barriers and ignores the potential of those with disabilities. And so, this bill is a has been a work of love for myself and my joint sponsor. We have worked with a number of advocate organizations, community groups, leaders, even the provider agencies that have some of these certificates to really come to a bill that I think addresses as many of the concerns and issues as we possibly can related to a system that was built in the 1930s. So I want to say that again. The 1930s is when we built this system, particularly related to 14 Cs. And so this is other states have passed it. In fact, 16 other states have passed a bill phasing out or moving away from subminimum wage. And additionally, Texas and Washington have discontinued 14C contracts. And then I think Alabama, the District of Columbia, Vermont, Wyoming have no active 14C certificates, which means that not only do they not have they don't need to phase out anything because they don't have anything left. There's no organization in those states that actually provide or support some minimum wage. And so we as Ohioans, I think it's time for us to have a very clear debate on what some minimum wage has done to people with disabilities, predominantly, but others. There's a case law that I can get into later around people who were blind, who were paid below what they were worth, and then they moved towards a lawsuit, and that led to them getting back wages. I was here in Ohio, and so I could talk a little bit more about that. But at the end of the day, it's about seeing people and recognizing that each person, regardless of their have a physical disability, a developmental disability, a addiction or mental illness. Every person deserves the dignity of work, and providing a level of support to them that's no different than anyone else. And so happy to do this, and I'm excited about where we go from here.
Thank you, Representative Jarrells. I have been watching you spearhead this effort, and it's very clear to me that you're passionate about this issue, along with many other really important issues
Thank
in
you.
our state. So tell us how you got involved with
Yeah.
this, and why is this meaningful to you?
Well, first off, I got to shout out to my former colleague, Representative Bridget Kelly.
Yeah.
She was and is an economic justice warrior through and through. She's currently our Hamilton County recorder, or auditor. So which one of the two? I can't remember which one of the two it is. Um, but she has been really a someone who I've looked up to even before my time in the legislature related to economic justice issues. And so if you look at my portfolio of legislation, you kind of see a pattern emerge. One is ensuring that no person feels as though the wages in which they earn um, is different than anyone else's. And what I mean by that is there's no law that creates that inequity, or perpetuates that inequity. Every person who wants to work should do so without barriers. And that includes, subminimum wage, that includes the benefit cliff issues, that includes being able to get their pay stubs, that includes having a wage that is commensurate to your ability to live. And so much of this is born out of my own personal experiences navigating the east side of Cleveland,
Mm.
where I saw in real time what it was like to not have enough around the table, to have to sacrifice and have to see parents have to work multiple jobs to make ends meet, right? And struggle even though they're spending so much of their livelihood in a building, right? Doing whether it was manual labor or office work, they weren't with their families because they were always working because they were, essentially struggling to make ends meet. And so much of this work for me is personal. I oftentimes say, if you boil down everything I do in my life, it's about saving my mom and my family, and having the foresight to think critically about what type of bills and legislation could really impact people who come from where I came from. And so this is just one, if you will, branch of the economic justice lens that I really want to bring to the forefront, alongside my colleagues. And this is not a Democrat or Republican issue. This is a humanitarian issue, in my belief. Because we want stabilized families. We want families to have what they need. We want families to thrive in this state. And to get there, it requires us to be bold and to actually address issues that impact them and their tables, their kitchen tables, where they think about these issues at.
Yeah, and it's clear that it's really important that we kind of look through that lens. And we're just saying we just want people to be paid the minimum wage or above. So
Yeah.
it's not saying that there should be some special treatment or, any kind of like right now what's happening, and like you explained, was people are being valued. So people are entering some of these places that have 14Cs, and it's almost like it's such an arcane process. But as I have talked to parents whose children actually have gone through this, it's basically you're like being watched and observed and put through some little tests, and then they value you making less than $1 an hour. And
Hmm.
so just the process alone, when I heard it, and having two kids myself, it is I like my it's gut wrenching to me to
Hmm.
think about my kids and all the work that my kids do to like just try to belong in their
Yes.
classroom and try to belong in their community. And then to think that at the end of the day, in 5 years, when my son turns 18, that he could be valued as being less of a citizen, basically, because
Hmm.
all citizens of the United States should be paid minimum wage based on that in the 1930s when we decided that that was, the country that we wanted to be. And so I think when we just look at it from an economic standpoint and what parents and families are trying to do to get their children, ready through public school or private school or whatever you're trying to do to get them ready to be independent citizens, it's really makes zero sense for us to then kind of go backwards and do these institutionalized settings and then have them be paid this just arcane old style wage. And so I mean, you kind of just look at it like that. All we want is that minimum wage, and
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
that's all we really want these places to start doing.
And what I would tell you is, and you're absolutely right. I think this is about justice, in my belief, right? As I look at it through the bill through my eyes and the conversations I've had with families, right? I understand that, Ohio has some of the most 14C certificates in comparison to other states.
Yeah.
And I think what I do see is a generational shift going on because there was a point of time before the 2000s, if my belief, right,
Hmm.
where individuals with developmental disabilities unfortunately had to succumb a number of perceptual barriers. We've seen language changes throughout my lifetime. I was born in '88. We've seen individuals really illuminate, individuals with developmental disabilities are no different than anyone else. And so when I think about the other end of the spectrum, those who may have older uh, 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 kids, and they're older themselves, they're in their 70s and 80s. I've had very differing conversations with that group saying, I just want to have a system that I know my child is protected when I transition on. And I understand both in perspectives because if you were in a system since the 1950s and 60s and 70s, and you've been, a beneficiary of 14C, because your child has, a more complex set of needs, um, you want to have a system of care that really supports them. And what I will tell you, this conversation related to minimum wage is not the only conversation we need to have related to our system. One of the things that we were able to do in this bill, we have a task force called the Employment First Task Force, and it is supposed to look at ways in which to address developmental disability needs across Ohio. Um, we beefed that particular task force's role up significantly in this bill, from working with employers in the transitions and developing recommendations, um, with services that's connected to national standards. We have also put in the bill to do a report biannually about best practices, challenges, and legislative suggestions for improving the system of care for those with developmental disabilities. We have created, even within that particular task force, the ability to review transition plans so that we can see in real time what are some of the other underlining issues within our system that one perpetuates this prejudice, right? Two, also is maybe underfunded and not as invested in as it should be. And then three, what are those legislative gaps so that we can actually begin to those parents who are concerned and fearful of the system leaving their child behind. How do we make sure that we're building a robust system of care so that every single child, every single person, regardless if you have a disability or not, get the level of care that they deserve? And this is the conversation through subminimum wage. We're having this conversation about a more of a broader, better system for all of us. And so I'm excited about this work because I've been able to hear from families from every single walk of life. And we've tailored our bill to really meet the focal points of the issues that so many families and parents and advocates brought to our attention.
Yeah, I think you really touched on there is a fear. A lot of us, as we navigate the system with our family members, disabilities, you tend to fight and fight and fight. And then you kind of have a win or you some kind of serve for your child. And then you can sit back and relax and for a little bit until you have to fight again. And I think for a lot of families in that older generation, these places were okay, we got it. Now we can sit back a little bit. And, there's a place for them to go. But what we know, the younger generation, and I think we're sometimes looked at as naive when we talk about these kind of bills, is we aren't going to put our kids in any institutional type settings. So we're looking at our big departments, Medicaid, DODD, the OOD, the Ohioans, Opportunities for Ohioans with Disabilities, and we're saying, look, be ready for us because we're not going to do this. We're not different path here of community integration. So if I'm going to be working this hard to make sure my kids are fully included in their public school, then you better be darn sure that when I graduate and get out into the community that they're not going to be segregated away from everybody else. So I need these departments in our government and basically all of my community here in Cincinnati to be ready because here we come. And so I think you're exactly right. These conversations that we've had in these interested party meetings, you held meetings with so many stakeholders, and you could very clearly see the generational divide. I think one thing that became clear to me is the voice of people with disabilities was very powerful in those
Yes.
meetings. And I know that you found that, and I find that in my work. But then we do have these great, powerful advocates who have disabilities themselves, and they are able to tell their story and talk about how, at one time they were paid subminimum wage and now they work in the community and make a living wage. And so talk about how people with disabilities and, sometimes we call them self-advocates have
Yes.
made some impacts on this bill.
Well, well, I'll tell you, Jen and Lindsey, the only reason I'm doing this bill again is because of the self-advocates who've reached out to me personally, who I've met with and spoke with in groups and during my IP meetings. And I've heard stories of their own resilience. And it's not just fighting to be paid what they are worth. It's also having to navigate the eyes, the perceptions, the ideas that they are not worthy to do what they're doing. Um, I had a young person come to me who was a young adult who told me about them working in some minimum wage at one point, and their mom at the time was very much a big advocate of them and helped them navigate. And they did almost like a test. They left the workshop and they went to try and get because they were rated, he was rated at a particular level, so he wasn't getting minimum wage. So they pulled him out of the 14C. They put him into a job where he found a job where he was making well over minimum wage. I think it was like 17, $18. And he worked there with healthcare benefits and everything. The mom, just I guess in partnership with the son, right, decided to put him back in, or at least test, right, do a test to see, would he qualify at that moment to receive minimum wage. And he still was rated at a level that he would have received less than minimum wage if he was placed back into the workshop.
That's
So
awful.
and so think about that, right? So, you
Mm-hmm.
know, this particular system is very much antiquated. And there's been multiple research done in the 70s, 80s, and even now, right, related to uh how this system does not necessarily live up to current realities and trends. And that's why so many states have moved away from the practice to begin with,
Yeah.
because they've heard not
Mm-hmm.
just the voices of advocates and the voices of those with developmental disabilities, physical disabilities, but they've seen it in real time, right? They've seen it in the reports and the research that was done related to this practice. And so I just say to I know that there's a lot of fear in change. And that's the one thing that I dealt with when I first introduced this bill last GA and 134th GA. There was a lot of fear. And so I waited. I really did. I did the work. You know, I paused the bill in a way. And I kept having meetings. I probably had over 15 to 20, 30 meetings, whether IP big meetings, right, with
Mm-hmm.
various stakeholders to craft a bill that I think gets at the heart of the issue, but does so in a way that's conscientious of the multiple dynamics at play related to families and those who are in uh, the system trying to navigate it successfully. And so I think at the end of the day, every single parent that I've talked to, every single self-advocate and person with developmental disabilities, but I always just call them persons, right? People, right? Every
Mm-hmm.
person I talked with, they simply just want to live. They just want to be, they want to live, they want to be acknowledged, they want to be affirmed, they want to be told that they can do anything they put their heart and mind to.
Yeah.
That is what's at stake.
Yep.
And I'm trying to build a legislation that actually speaks to that simple truth that we all should be treated with the type of dignity and respect that we deserve.
I agree. It's great. I think it's time. Like you said, there are a number of states that have already done this. There's some other states that are working on it. We
Mhm.
generally do that, these little experiments across the states. And then as these happen where we kind of see a momentum, then the
Yes,
federal government kind of looks into it, and they are looking into it
yes,
at the federal level. Um, but I would love to see Ohio, take this step, because you are giving some time in this bill for these places that have these 14C certificates to, you know, make sure that the people that are involved in these places have somewhere to go, that they're going to be okay. And there is
yes.
can you talk about the time frame?
Yes, I would love to. So to break down the bill a little bit more, so we have basically this bill, this iteration of the bill is a 5-year plan. And so when the bill is passed into law, um, obviously the bill doesn't take effect until 90 days because there's no emergency clause to this bill. So after 90 days, essentially nothing changes for 5 years, right? And but what does happen over time is each and every 14C certified business will begin to submit to our employment first task force their transition plans to begin to move away from 14Cs. And so obviously in that 5 years, by the time the fifth year comes, there will be no more certificates in Ohio, essentially. And whether or not these individuals are like the systems in which they created could very well be the same, but the money in which you pay that person will be completely different. You'll be paying that person at that time a minimum wage. And so these transition documents are key for us to see there may be some individuals who have more complex need, as I like to say, which would require us as a system to have a better or individualized plan for certain individuals. And so this 5 years gives us the opportunity to assess the landscape, to begin to have build plans for these individuals to be moved into more of a competitive, supported employment opportunity. And for those who are have more complex need, we provide a deeper level of support and care for them and their family so that they don't feel or have the fear of seeing their child be moved away from a program that they've maybe spent all their life in. And so with that 5 years, it gives us a time to really assess the system and to say, what else can we do as legislators to support these individuals with these complex needs while also ensuring that our system lives up to the promise of providing a level of dignity and respect to every single person, regardless of their developmental disability or their physical disability. And so that 5 years gives us a timeline, if you will. It's not a lot of time, but it's not a little time, but it gives us enough time to really begin to move our system forward and to do it with intentionality. And so I'm excited about that. I mean, that was something that, was a hard sale for some, but we negotiated and worked and built compromises where we settled on this timeline as a way to really begin to address the systemic needs that may have not been addressed for a very long time.
I like the timeline because 5 years, like I said, will give my son, he'll be turning 18 in 5 years. So I myself think it's just the perfect compromise. Just being a little selfish about it. Um, okay, so the last question I have for you is how can families like mine and Lindsay's and any family in Ohio who, might want to support this bill, how can they help you with this? So I know you just introduced it. It's not in committee yet. One thing I know is there will be a virtual event that will offer some more information on the bill that APSE is putting on. That's on March 28th, and we'll put the information about that in the podcast, and we'll be sending out some in our newsletter at the ARC, some information on that. But is there anything else? Would you like more stories, emails, like testimony? What would you want?
I think what I will say is that we have an opportunity to, I want to say, overwhelm the state house, but I think we have an opportunity to really provide multiple ways to engage our legislators to show how important this is. What I would tell you is that many of us uh, in the legislature may not have family members. We may know somebody, we may not have family members who deal with this on a day-to-day basis. And so there's a lack of awareness and understanding around this issue. And so for parents and for self-advocates, for those who've experienced having to navigate this system, it is so critical that you share your voice with us. It is so important that you write to us. I want to thank Arc of Ohio um, for putting together, leading the charge on a support letter. We've had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people and organizations sign on to it. I would urge every single family to sign on to the letter to show how one of the things I want to do is when we have our first hearing committee, I would love to have people in the audience pack it out so that individuals know, like, we have the support of our community behind us. It's not simply a bill with words, right? This is a living, breathing document that is going to transform so many people's lives in this state. And we want you to be seen. And so as soon as we get the hearing date, I'll be sending it out to the partners. Would love to have a way to just pack the place out because we want our Ohio legislators to understand that this is not an issue that we can sweep underneath the rug, that we can just close our eyes and wish it away. This is a real and present issue that we need to address as a body. And to do so, it doesn't matter if you're Republican, Democrat, agnostic, independent, I don't care, right? We want every person who's going to be impacted by this to show up, to speak out, and to really share their story because this is your bill as much as it is mine. And I always tell that to families. This is not just my bill. Much of the words that's in this bill was curated by the honesty and the support of those who had the courage to speak up and share their story with me at the time. I drafted this bill with names and people in mind and experiences in mind so that no one felt left out. And so this is not just my bill. This is our bill. And so I want to see our bill get moved and get moved into law. It's going to take all of us to do it. And so I'm excited about where we go from here and your involvement in the future. But we'll have more information as to how to get involved. But most importantly, share your story with us. Share your story with my office. Share your story with Representative Lips. We want to do everything possible to make sure that people feel seen, heard, and inspired by the work that we're doing here in the legislature.
Yes, thank you so much for this, Representative Jarrells. I am truly sitting here right now trying not to cry because I just want my son Whitman, who is on the spectrum and also has a disorder called apraxia, which causes him not to be able to motor plan what he wants to say. He can think it, he just can't say it. And we feel invisible. And the thought of having him be a number and walking in someplace has always broken my heart. And so bringing this to Ohio is just kudos to you and thank you for what you are doing. Everybody's story deserves to be heard. And so, as you heard Representative Jarrells say just a moment ago, please share your story with his office. Please, let's do it. Let's pack the house. Let's do whatever we can to get this bill in action. Thank you so much, sir, for taking the time to be on our podcast today. And we will see you guys later.
Thank you so much to both of you. And again, I'm looking forward to seeing the work that we do together on this bill.
Yes, I'm
Thank
so
you all.
excited.
I am too.